Clockwise, the accident that synchronized the entire world. Every clock ever made goes in the same direction. Not because it has to, because of where the sun falls in one specific part of the planet. If civilization had started somewhere else, your watch would run the other way and you would never have noticed. Look at any clock. The hands move right. Up, across, down, back. You have never questioned this. You should. Because there is nothing physically necessary about that direction. The mechanism inside a clock does not prefer it. The mathematics of timekeeping does not require it. A clock could spin either way and tell the time just as accurately. The direction is a choice made thousands of years ago by people standing in the sun, watching shadows move across stone. And the accident that locked in that choice is one of the most consequential geographical facts in human history. To understand it, you need to go back before clocks existed. Before clocks, there were sundials. The sundial is one of the oldest instruments ever built. The Egyptians had obelisks that cast shadows as early as 3500 BCE. These were not just monuments. They were the most precise timekeeping tools their civilization had. The shadow of an obelisk moves across the ground as the sun moves across the sky. Mark the positions, give them names, you have a clock. The Greeks refined the sundial into a precise instrument with marked hour lines. The Romans adopted it and spread it across their empire. At the height of Rome, there were dozens of public sundials in the Forum alone. Roman generals carried portable sundials on campaign. For nearly 4,000 years, if you wanted to know what time it was, you looked at a shadow. And here is the thing about shadows in the northern hemisphere. They move in one specific direction. If you are standing north of the equator and you watch a shadow on a flat surface over the course of a day, it traces an arc. It starts in the west at sunrise. It sweeps through north at midday. It ends in the east at sunset. West to north to east. Left up right. That arc, that specific arc, is what we now call clockwise. Not the other way around. Not because the universe chose it. Because the civilizations that invented mechanical timekeeping happened to be in the northern hemisphere. Greece, Rome, China, Mesopotamia, medieval Europe. All north of the equator. All watching the same shadow, make the same arc every single day for thousands of years. The arc became invisible. It was just the way time moved. Nobody noted it down as a discovery because nobody thought it was a discovery. It was as obvious as the sun itself. When the first mechanical clocks were built in Europe in the late 13th century, their makers faced a design question. Which way should the hands move? There was no technical answer. The escapement mechanism that drives a clock hand works identically in either direction. The gears can be cut to turn either way at the same cost. There was no engineering reason to prefer one direction over the other. So the clockmakers looked at the sundials. The sundials said, this way. The shadows always moved this way. And so the hands went this way. It was not a decision in the way we think of decisions. No committee met. No document was written. No standard was agreed upon. The direction was simply inherited from the shadow, without anyone acknowledging that a choice had been made at all. Shadow becomes dial, dial becomes clock, clock becomes world. The first mechanical clocks appeared in European monasteries in the 1300s. They had no minute hands. No second hands. Only an hour hand, moving in the direction the shadow had always moved. These clocks were not built for the public. They were built for monks. The church had a problem. How do you get an entire community to pray at the same moment? You ring a bell. But who decides when to ring the bell? You need someone watching the time. The mechanical clock solved this by automating the bell. It rang itself. At the canonical hours, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. 8 times a day, every day, the clock told the monastery when to stop and pray. This was the first time in history that a machine, rather than a person, organized human behavior by the hour. Collective time had been invented. Before the mechanical clock, time was local and approximate. Your noon was not my noon. Every town ran on its own shadow. The baker opened when it felt like morning. The market ran until it felt like evening. There was no shared now. The clock ended that. It created a standardized, universally imposed present moment. A shared now that everybody had to agree on, whether they wanted to or not. And all of it moved clockwise, because of shadows in Rome and Athens and Babylon. By the 15th century, clockmakers had added the minute hand. The minute hand revealed something uncomfortable. Different towns had different times. A clock in London and a clock in Bristol, both correctly set to local noon, would show different times at the same moment. This was not a problem until trains arrived. Train timetables required coordinated time across long distances. If Bristol noon was 10 minutes behind London noon, trains would miss each other. The solution was to abolish local time entirely. In 1847, the British railway companies adopted Greenwich Mean Time as the single standard for all timetables. Every clock in Britain was reset to match London. Thousands of years of local solar time, erased in a single administrative decision, replaced with a number on a dial moving clockwise in one agreed direction. Time had become political. By the 17th century, the second hand had appeared. Each new hand reinforced the direction. Clockwise was no longer a convention. It was the definition. Deviation required justification. Conformity required nothing. The direction had become invisible again, but this time permanently. Now here is the experiment that proves how arbitrary the whole thing is. Go to Australia. Stand in the southern hemisphere. Watch a shadow on a flat surface over the course of a day. It moves the opposite way. East to south to west. Right down left. What we call anticlockwise. In the southern hemisphere, the sun moves across the northern sky rather than the southern sky. The shadow arc reverses. If the first great civilizations had been built south of the equator, every clock ever made would run the other way. We would call that direction clockwise. We would call our direction anticlockwise. And the word anticlockwise would feel like the natural one, because it would be the one we had used all our lives. The entire sensation of rightness you feel when you look at clock face is an accident of latitude. Nothing more. There is actually evidence of what this alternate world would have looked like. Ancient sundials found in the southern Mediterranean, from sites where the sun angle is different enough to produce ambiguity, sometimes ran the other way. Some archaeological finds from South America show circular time markers, where the shadow progression goes right to left rather than left to right. These were not mistakes. They were locally correct. The shadow they were tracking moved that way. The people who made them were not backwards. They were just south. The Industrial Revolution made the northern accident permanent. Factories needed synchronized labor on a scale no monastery had ever required. The shift whistle blew at 6. The gates closed at 6. If you were not there at 6, the machine ran without you, and the wages went to someone who was. The clock was not just telling time. It was enforcing discipline. The historian E.P. Thompson documented how the transition from task-based work to clock-based work was one of the most violent cultural disruptions of the industrial era. Workers who had organized their day around natural rhythms, sunrise, hunger, fatigue, had to reorganize around an abstract number on a dial. The clock became a tool of power. And everything it organized moved in that one inherited direction. By the 19th century, the direction was so embedded that clocks running anticlockwise were used only as curiosities, jokes, novelties. Lewis Carroll put a backwards clock in Alice through the Looking Glass in 1871. The joke only worked because the audience immediately understood backwards as wrong. Not different, wrong. The direction had become moral. Clockwise was correct. Anticlockwise was chaos. The 20th century took this further. When analog clocks gave way to digital displays, the clockwise convention survived. Digital clocks do not have hands. They have numbers. But progress bars on computers fill left to right. Loading animations spin clockwise. Dials and gauges go clockwise. The direction migrated from the clock face into the entire visual language of technology. You can see it everywhere once you start looking. Volume knobs rotate clockwise to increase. Combination locks turn clockwise first. Screws tighten clockwise. Jar lids open anticlockwise. These are not independent conventions. They all trace back, through chains of industrial and cultural inheritance, to the same shadow on the same sundial. There are a few genuine holdouts. The Hebrew calendar has traditionally been depicted moving right to left, mirroring the direction of Hebrew script. Some Islamic prayer practices involve anticlockwise circumambulation, walking around the Kaaba counter to the direction that would feel natural in a clockwise default culture. The Prague astronomical clock, built in 1410, has certain elements that move in non-standard directions. And in the southern hemisphere, some designers have deliberately built clocks that run anticlockwise, as a statement about the arbitrariness of the convention. These clocks keep perfect time. They are disorienting to look at. Which tells you everything. Not that anticlockwise is wrong, but that 4,500 years of visual training is hard to override. Today, the direction is so deep in human cognition that it shapes things nobody connects to clocks at all. We describe positive progress as moving forward, as moving right, as things trending upward on the right side of a graph. The right side of a graph is the future side because graphs run left to right, and left to right feels like the natural direction of time. Which it does because clocks run clockwise and clockwise starts at the top and moves right. The clock is not just on your wall. The clock is inside language. One shadow, one sundial, one hemisphere. The whole world set its time to match a shadow in ancient Greece. Every clock ever made. Every timetable ever printed. Every deadline ever set. Every moment you have ever been late for. All of it pointing in the same direction. Not because it is right. Because it is north. The simulation logged this as a single point of failure, with maximum downstream propagation. One geographical accident. Entire civilization synchronized. Still running. Subscribe, one object a day. Comment below, what other direction do you take completely for granted?